Hey folks, welcome to the Better Performance Podcast. Now this month, what I thought I'd do is do a podcast just talking about my experience and some of the things I see as a coach, and just talking about my brief history and where I've come from. Because when I was chatting to Andy and Liz when I did Le Jog, they were saying, look, it's great you've created your podcast, but a lot of people are new to you and have never really heard anything about you. So learning a little bit about you, your history and what you've done in the past might help people understand where you're coming from. And actually went away and thought about it. And even though there's a few people I'd really love to get on the podcast, and the next podcast for my inspirational guest is a lady who has just done a world record. So I'm excited to get her on board, but more about that later maybe. So, right, let's get into it. When I finished school, and that's quite a while ago, I'm now 52. I had the option of going to uni or doing something different. And my father, who was very ill at the time, said to all of us, if there's something that you want to do in life, go and do it. So I broke with tradition and decided to become a racehorse jockey. Now, as kids, we all learned to ride, and I thought, do you know what, sod it. I'm going to go down to Cheltenham and become a racehorse jockey and see how I get on with that. So I gave that a go for about 3 or 4 years. And if I'm really honest, I wasn't very good as a jockey. I'm going to blow my own trumpet and say I was a pretty decent horse person. And I was quite well known for riding difficult horses and bringing them on. But realistically, I wasn't hungry enough as a jockey. I wasn't ruthless enough as a jockey. And I remember sitting across the weighing room about 3 years into my sort of career thinking, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be 40 and still doing this. This is tough. And you have epiphany moments in your life. And I just decided, right, stop. Time to get out of this and go and do something else. So I left racing. I completely cut ties with it because racing horses is pretty full on and it's very addictive. So I decided that's it, I had enough. And I went traveling for a little bit and then came back and thought, where do I go next? My sister, who lived in London, said, look, come and live with me and we'll find you a job and, let's get you back on your feet. So after lots of job searches, I got into the health and fitness industry, doing sales and duty management. But I always looked at the PTs thinking, well, they have way more fun than I do. So I studied and became a PT and started helping people get fitter, look better, lose weight, learn about nutrition. And very quickly, I started going down the route of coaching people to do marathons and started to help people coach and train for doing things like triathlon and things of that nature. Because from an early age, I always ran, biked and swam as a kid. And it was kind of in my blood. So I was in London for 10 years and I decided that I'd had enough of the rat race and I needed to get out. So I moved to Bristol for a bit and then I moved down to Devon. Anyway, cut a long story short, I did a lot of training, racing for Ironman and triathlon and loved it. It was brilliant. Then about 12 years ago, I had a major meltdown. I was working really hard. I was training really hard. I was trying to juggle many things. I'd just won my second year as personal trainer of the year award. And I literally had overloaded myself and my body shut down. And mentally, I was just broken. So I went home to Scotland for a little bit. My brother looked after me. I changed jobs completely. I was horribly depressed for about a year and completely came out of the fitness industry and worked for my brother for a bit. And that was a tough year. I really lost myself. But for me, if you see any of my YouTube videos or anything else that I talk about on socials, the sport, especially the bike, got me back into being me again. And after a year of working for my brother in his wine merchants, running his accounts and the back end of his office, I started an online coaching business called Triforce Endurance. And that grew fairly quickly. And there was a point on the second year of working with my brother that I needed to make a decision. Did I stay working with him, or did I start going alone? And was I strong enough mentally? Had I broken free from my depression? And the answer to that question was yes, I had. So I decided to take a leap of faith, went 100% in on Triforce. And Triforce has grown and grown and grown. And then in lockdown, I started Velo Performance because one of the guys I was coaching at the time saw me riding my bike and seeing some of the things I'd been doing on my bike and said, look, Simon, at the age of 50, you can clearly ride a bike. You're in good shape. You look after yourself. You understand nutrition. You've clearly studied it. And you should be helping people who ride bikes get the most out of their training. But more importantly, you should help people understand how to eat well, break free from all the fatty stuff that they see on the internet. So I decided that I'd start Velo Performance because I didn't want it to be about racing. I wanted Velo Performance to be more of a lifestyle business where it's surrounded by the one thing that I love, which is bikes. And it grew pretty quickly. From starting Triforce, I kind of knew how to bring on a business very quickly. My social media understanding of Instagram, Facebook, emails, things of that nature is pretty strong. The only thing I didn't really understand was YouTube, but I pretty much jumped straight into that clueless and thought, well, start, see how you get on. And I've enjoyed the experience of building that over time. And then this year I started the podcast. Let's talk about my history and how I got into the long distance side of things. So when I was a PT, I was helping people train for triathlons and marathons. And I was training to be in really good shape, but I loved running and I used to go running a lot. So I started running half marathons, then marathons. So I did Paris Marathon. And then when I moved to Devon, I was doing half marathons and adventure races. And when I started Triforce Endurance, I started doing 70.3s and then Ironman and then back to 70.3. And I love that sport. It's challenging to learn how to fit it all in together. It's very rewarding when you do. And I would have kept that sport going had it not been for my Achilles giving me major grief on a regular basis, to the point where I used to just break down all the time. And I'd get to a certain point with my running where I could get it in a decent position where I could run off the bike in 1:28. I would be thinking, right, I'm ready to try and get myself in a position to get to the World Championships. And then I'd run 5 miles down the road on an easy run and break down again, and then spend the next 6 months trying to rehab the Achilles and start again. And eventually I just had enough. It's been to see so many different physios, spent a lot of money on different procedures to try and improve the strength of it, the rehabbing of it, and it never really came true. And it was super tough mentally to deal with. And I decided, look, I'm going to stop this now. The one thing that was really clear to me and to others was that I could ride a bike. And I loved it. I loved the discipline of just focusing on one big sport and challenging myself in different things. So I did a lot of sportives. I did some road racing, which I didn't particularly enjoy. I always thought it was super dangerous. And I didn't fancy losing skin. I had a couple of minor crashes, and I remember thinking on the second one, bikes are expensive. I don't want to break myself. So I just decided from that point, I would just focus on doing self-styled crazy events that pretty much meant more to me than anybody else. So that started me to do challenge events like riding 100 miles every day for 10 days to raise money for Mind and Shelter. I did a 5-day self-styled challenge where I took on 5 of the toughest sportives here in North Devon, which covered anywhere between 100 and 110 miles a day and over 11,000 feet of climbing. I did a 24-hour event where I went around the same loop in 24 hours to beat a local record. So that's a bit of a brief history of where I've come from. I'm sure there's things I've missed out. But I think to get an idea and a flavor of where I've come from and who I am is probably good for the listener or anybody watching this on YouTube. So let's talk about coaching and the whole reason why I started Velo Performance. And that is purely because, and if I haven't said it already, I'll say it again. I love my cycling, and there's a lot of people that love their cycling. And I wanted to start a business that wasn't about winning, wasn't about racing. It was about being the best that you can be physically, focused around cycling, but also trying to help people get the best from their nutrition and basically be the best they can be on and off the bike. Let's talk about my thought process of training. And again, you know, I'll say it billions of times to people. I think our understanding of aging is still a bit Victorian. I think for the most part, most people believe that once they get to a certain age, things change, slow down. They get, you know, weaker, fatter, all these sort of things. And the more that I dig deep into the understanding of what is possible as you get older, the more that I feel that you can kick back at your age, but you still have to work at it. And this is the thing that I think a lot of people just don't do. They accept the fact that as they get older, these things happen and they don't push back at it. And that's the whole point of Velo, is to say, look, you know, want to be better, want to be in good shape, want to age exceptionally well and still love riding your bike. It's totally possible. You just need to train well, need to train hard in certain places, and need to eat the right foods. So delving into the understanding of what is possible and what we should be doing as we get older, I truly believe, and I've seen it in myself and the people that I coach, that we need to be strong. The more strength we have, the better it is for your long-term health and your long-term health span. And again, you know, you just need to look at people talking about it in the health and fitness industry who really understand this, is that once you start creating strength, it can play a massive benefit in your overall health span. And what I mean by health span is that your healthiness right till the end of your life is increased. And that can only be a good thing. So strength training is definitely a really important aspect of your health. But also, as you get older, if you look at the science behind what happens to us physically as we get older, we lose muscle mass and we lose muscle strength, quality, function, if we don't use it. And this is a thing I talk about a lot with people that I coach. If you don't use it, you lose it. So one thing I coach massively within Velo Performance for the guys and the ladies, girls that I coach, is that strength and power is really important to focus on, as is explosive power. So that's things like plyometrics, VO2 and lactate threshold work on the bike. Because if you can consistently do that in a well-structured way, you're going to consistently be able to fight that aging process much longer than people who just ride steady all the time. And this is an issue I see a lot of people falling into, or a trap a lot of people fall into as they get older. I need to do less. I shouldn't be doing all this hard work. That mindset is all wrong. It's, if you want to be slow, if you want to be weak, just ride your bike in zone 2 everywhere. And eventually what you'll do is you'll end up just being slow, weak, and ineffective on your bike. If you want to be in the best shape of your life, you need to train in the gym and lift heavy, or at least the new science shows that you don't actually need to lift super heavy, but you need to lift moderately heavy over more repetitions to create that strength you're looking for. Now, I won't go too much into this because this is something I've talked about in different vlogcasts on the YouTube channel, but lifting heavy gets you there faster. Lifting moderately gets you there slower, but does the same thing, still has the same effect. So again, you know, what I'm trying to teach and what I'm trying to show people, what I'm trying to encourage people to do when they're part of Velo is to think differently, think out of the old school focus of just doing stretching, not pushing themselves too much. Because again, I'll say it billions of times, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And if you look at all the science and the data on that, and how you can improve yourself as you get older, that one thing really sticks true. So I think if I cap off on my understanding of training, the one thing that I think that still matters today is that the compounding effect of consistency over time is what's going to get you in the best shape of your life. And I still think at my age, so I'm 52, I'm going to be 53 in December, still think that I can achieve a lot more. When I look at my training, it's good, it's consistent, it's focused. But in actual fact, I think with some tweaks and additions and changes, I can get stronger. I can improve my ability to ride my bike faster. And that only to me is quite exciting. It just means that I need to challenge myself a bit more. Let's talk about things I'm not keen on. So I think it's best described as this: just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I've studied nutrition with MNU. It's a whole year course, and it's massively focused on the science and evidence-based information on nutrition. And nutrition is something I've studied since I was a PT. And there's a lot of things that I've learned over the years that I was a little bit confused with, or thought, well, that doesn't kind of ring true. And then studying with MNU kind of filled in those gaps. And obviously, I'm fascinated about what we can do from a dietary perspective to ward off aging muscle. And this is what I coach at Velo. A lot of people talk about nutrition. So anything you see in the papers or any of these gurus that you see with their own podcast mainly talk about nutrition in terms of weight loss. And not many people talking about it from a longevity perspective and making sure you're eating the right foods for improving your longevity and your ability to recover, maintain lean muscle mass. And I think the thing is, what I see a lot of people talking about is fasting. Now, it's a tool in the toolbox for sure. And it is something that people can do if they've got a lot of body fat to lose, and that's their goal. But when you look at the science, just because you can fast doesn't mean, if you're training specifically hard to be the best that you can be on the bike and have good lean muscle mass, that you should. And the more that I look at the understanding of what we need from maintaining lean muscle mass, we need to be making sure that we eat enough protein spread across a whole day to maintain muscle protein synthesis. If we have a window of eating which limits that, then we are limiting our ability to maintain and potentially grow lean muscle mass. So again, I'll go back to this again. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Other things that I think really drive me nuts is the low carb zealots and the people that say, you can't lose weight if you don't go low carb. That's the one thing that people forget or ignore or brush over, is that calories drive body weight. Macronutrients can help drive body composition. But ultimately, if you overeat calories, then you're going to put on body weight. This is the thing about studying nutrition, is that once you understand that calories are the most important thing, then when you look at macronutrients and you understand from what I've studied that actually having a high protein diet is important for maintaining lean muscle mass. And then when you realize that actually carbohydrates are actually muscle sparing, and by what I mean muscle sparing is that when you look at the studies on to do with humans, when you have a higher carbohydrate diet, you maintain more lean muscle than you would do if you compared that diet with a higher fat diet, and calories are equated. But I'll say this again, because this is the thing that drives me nuts, is people forget about calories and people talk about macronutrients. And ultimately, when we're looking at our diet, calories come first, then you need to look at proteins, carbohydrates, and fats for performance, recovery, and health. I think it's probably a good idea to talk about some of the things that in the fitness realm at the moment, which just, I think it's almost, I don't know how to say this without swearing, but there's a lot of nonsense in the fitness industry right now. Some of the things that I'm seeing that really is, I think, quite detrimental to people's understanding of nutrition, is that calories mean nothing. It's all about blood sugars and gut hormones. And that's definitely what's prevalent at the moment, are all these blood glucose monitors saying that if you wear these blood glucose monitors, it's going to show you how you react to certain foods and how you can cut out certain foods, because you know that if you eat this, it's going to raise your blood sugars. These monitors are very helpful for people who have type 2 diabetes. But just for the general population, I think they're, dare I say it, are pointless. And I've worn blood glucose monitors because I wanted to try them out. I used Super Sapiens, and I remember trying out for a week, and it was interesting to see that when I ate food, my blood glucose went up. But that's a normal process. It has to happen. If that didn't happen, you die, because the whole point is that blood glucose goes up, your body releases insulin, and the insulin pumps all the nutrients and glucose into the muscle cells. That's its whole purpose. And there's a lot of people out there who are being duped into spending a lot of money on these things and really losing their minds and getting very frightened by any hike in blood glucose levels and thinking they need to keep it low all the time. And actually, I don't think these glucose monitors are at all helpful in people's understanding of nutrition. It's actually creating a lot of anxiety on eating all kinds of foods, not just carbohydrates, but even proteins. And I think that actually is scary. Other things that drive me nuts are people turning around saying foods are toxic and really bad for us. If a food or any kind of food that we ate was truly toxic to us, we'd all be very ill all the time, and that's just not the case. And then there's a massive thing right now going on, I love it, is ice baths for fat loss. And I can't remember what I was reading the other day, but actually when you look at the science of fat loss, and people talking about ice baths improving brown fat utilization for helping us lose body fat, I think it's a very minimal hike in that brown fat becoming more metabolically active. So it's, for the stress of sitting in an ice bath for 10 minutes, just go on a calorie deficit. It's really not that rocket science, and it's about taking control of what you eat. Other things I've noticed, which always makes me chuckle, are things like aero breathers. I don't know. I clicked on something on Facebook, which I wish I had never done ages ago, and I keep getting this aero breather advert that comes up. It's like, these things don't work, and the adverts are very compelling, but it always makes me chuckle. It's like, no, these things have been proven that they are pointless. So yeah, don't go and buy one of those. They're pointless. What a massive waste of money. And this might not be super popular, but I hear this a lot where with people as they get older, saying that as they get older, their hormones, metabolism are all out of whack. And that's the whole reason why they're putting on weight. Well, I'm going to say this billions of times. First and foremost, before you start blaming gut hormones and before you start blaming your metabolism for the fact that you've put on weight, is ask yourself the first few questions. How much exercise are you doing compared to when you were in your 20s, 30s, compared to where you are now in your 40s, 50s? And the second thing I'd challenge you to do would be to look at your diet and be very honest with yourself. When was the last time you actually fully doubled down and looked at what you're eating, calculate your calories, your macros, timings of foods, really delved deeply into what made you feel fuller for longer before automatically resulting to, it's my hormones, it's all to do with whatever, other than the fact that I'm just overeating food. And that's not super popular because people will automatically feel triggered by that. But if it's triggered you for me saying this, then I'll ask you, when was the last time you actually doubled down and really took a long, hard look at your nutrition and how you dealt with it on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis? Because if you aren't doing that, then in my mind, that's your first port of call. That's what you should be doing before you start putting the finger on saying, it's my hormones. It's definitely to do with my gut biome. It's nothing to do with what I'm eating on a day-to-day basis. So what am I focusing on myself in training, and, you know, where do I see myself? What do I see myself doing in a couple of years? I think I'm going to do a YouTube video about this, but I think if anybody follows me on socials, they'll know that I've been talking about doing a Tour de France challenge. I think if I'm really honest, after doing Land's End to John O'Groats, my Achilles puffing up and chatting to my support crew, we've come to the decision that maybe we need to put that on hold for a little bit. There are three big reasons. First off is my Achilles flared up, and I've already given up one sport because my Achilles caused me problems, and stopped that and put that to bed. I never want my cycling to be destroyed by my Achilles. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit frightened after Le Jog that I'd probably done some really bad damage to it. I haven't, but it took nearly 2 weeks for it to settle down, and that scared me. I never want to be in that position ever again. I use my cycling as a way to challenge myself, but it's a massive part of keeping myself and my mental health really strong and happy. And if that was taken away from me because I did something that was radically over the top, I don't know what that would do to me. And I've pretty much come to the decision that let's put this on hold. And then when I spoke to Andy and Liz about doing this challenge in 2024, they were really honest with me and said, look, we could do it, but the time invested in supporting you is massive. And if we're really honest, we don't really want to do that. And I think that's very brave of them to say that. And I really get it. I really understand. The other thing is, and this is really important to get across, is I think doing that as a challenge would detract from how Velo is growing over time. And Velo is growing very strongly in a nice, steady way where we have coaches coming on board. We're growing the business in a robust way, which can support the new coaches on board. And I think me doing a challenge takes my eye off the ball on that front and stops me from being able to support and grow Velo and support and grow the coaches coming on board. And I don't want to do that. I want Velo to grow and the coaches to grow with Velo. I think what I've decided is I'm going to put that challenge to one side for just now, with the thought process that maybe that will happen in the future. You know, I reckon with what I'm doing in training, it's making me stronger, faster, more robust. So even if I put it to bed for 2-3 years, I could potentially pull it out the bag later on and go, this is where I want to go. But I think when I really sat down and thought about it after the jog, and I've had time to think about it, I thought I don't need to be doing these massive mammoth challenges. I think a lot of people look at them and say, I could never do that. I don't want to do that. Do I need to do that to be part of Velo? And the answer to that is no, you don't. I'll say it to everybody that starts at Velo. This is about you being the best that you can deliver, focus on in training, in your life. I'm here. The coaches are here just to guide you in the quickest, most efficient way to get you where you want to get to and inspire you to keep pushing when other people around you are not. But ultimately, I think when I really think about where Velo is growing, I want that to grow more. And I think taking time out in 2024 to do the Tour de France challenge stops it from growing. And I don't want that to happen. What does that mean in the future for what I'm thinking of doing on the bike? Well, I'm just looking at a few things right now. There are some fun things I want to do. So partly to do with the YouTube channel. Last year, my great mate Calvin and I talked about riding as far as we could do in 24 hours. So we watched GCN do this challenge where they started in one point and tried to ride as far as they could do in the UK. And we both looked at each other and thought, I think we can ride further than that. So that's one thing I think we're going to do next year. The other thing I'm thinking of doing next year is putting a team together from the coached athletes at Velo and doing the Hope Route Dolomites. I think that would be really exciting. Looking at it, that would be tough and challenging as a team. I think it would be fun to get some of the guys and the girls, so have a mixed team, and see whether we can do the best that we can in a year of training to be the best that we can come race day. And I know I've talked about Velo not being about winning, but the Hope Route in my mind isn't about being on a podium as such. It's about everybody loving the bike. The Hope Route is definitely something that is well run, it's got safety first, and it's just quite a special event. And I think having a group of us going to do that in the best shape of our lives at the age of 40, running up to 50, is only a really cool thing for us to do here at Velo. I think the other thing I want to briefly touch on, and it's quite personal, is my mental health. after my really bad year, I've worked really hard at trying to make sure that I identify when I'm really low. I identify things, people who bring me down, and I break away from them. And it's something I talk a little bit about on my social media, more in the stories rather than on the business side of things. I don't think that is something I need to talk about in the business side of things. But if you see me on Instagram, for instance, on Instagram, I use it this way. So the reels are informative. The posts are informative, fun, show what I've done, what our members are doing, has a lot of testimonials on it. And the stories that I put up are more to do about what I'm up to. So it gets you guys to connect a little bit more. And that goes across Facebook as well. So it really does give a flavor of who I am. But, I think I'm quite open about where I am mentally sometimes, when I'm feeling really strong or when I'm feeling a little bit low. And again, I talk about this so I can be authentic as much as possible. I kind of hate that phrase because people use it in the wrong way. But yeah, I think I talk about that when I feel I need to talk about it. And I know it's helped a lot of other people who watch, and they realize that as much as I'm having fun and I love riding my bike, there are times where I find it really tough, and just turning the pedals is a bit of a mental struggle. But the thing is, and this is the thing about riding the bike that's really made a difference, I know that I can go out on the bike and I might hate every pedal stroke, but I'll do it anyway, because the alternative is to sit at home and feel bad. And I know by the time I get to the end of that ride, I may not feel awesome, but I certainly will feel a lot better than if I'd stayed at home. And then the other thing I talk about, and you'll see on my Instagram post that I hashtag it, is gay cyclists. I think as time goes on, I think it is something I will talk a bit more about, because I remember having a conversation with someone who was a bit negative on my social feed and saying, why do I always hash that in? Surely I don't need to be doing that anymore. And I think the answer to that question is yes, I do, because there are still people who are struggling with their sexuality and struggling to come out. And if my hashtagging and talking about it openly shows anybody struggling with their sexuality that they can be a cyclist and go on crazy adventures on a bike and race on a bike or whatever they want to do, they can do this. They don't feel like it's a sport that they don't need to get into. And it's one, again, I'll talk about the London riders who are breaking that boundary down big time. They're big LGBTQ plus community in London who are very keen cyclists. They're beginners right up to super fast, strong riders. And I love that. It's great. They're basically breaking down boundaries. And I think that's great because the bike is for everybody. And I love riding my bike. So I'm always going to use that as a hashtag in my posts. I'm always never going to shy away from talking about it. I'm also a bit old school in the fact that I feel like I don't always need to talk about it. But, I think sport is a good medium to highlight everybody's differences and show some really good positivity about what can be done through sport. Righty, so let's wrap this up. I'll say it again. I love where Velo Performance is going. When I took on the other coaches, I really sat down and thought about, do I need to change its flow? Do I need to change it to be more to do with crit racing, TT racing, road racing? And I came to decisions like, no, I don't need to. The cool thing about everybody that is part of Velo is they understand that it's not about racing. It's about learning to be your best on and off the bike, learning to be the fittest, healthiest, more well-rounded person that you can be on and off the bike. If you decide to race and take on any challenge, then the outcome is the outcome. And for the most part, which is really cool actually, is for anybody that's raced has been in such good health, such good fitness, such good strength and power that they've actually produced a really good result. And that really excites me because it shows them that what they're doing in their own self-training really works. But ultimately, it's all about bikes and enjoying your riding a lot more. The fitter you are, the more you can go on more fun adventures with your friends. And again, the one thing I'm trying to do is show people at the age of 52, heading towards 53, that you don't have to accept that as you get older, you get slower. You can break that thought process right down and push it to one side, say, no, I don't have to accept that. I do need to work at it. And it is something I've talked about a lot in some of the posts that I put out. It's like, yes, as you get older, you still have to work at it the same way as you did when you were younger. And I think if I can get that message across and say, if you're willing to put that effort in, you're going to have a really fun time on your bike and you're going to look and feel way better than anybody that's just decided to give up and stop. Right, I think I better wrap it up there. Otherwise, I could talk for ages. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. I hope you've got a little bit more of an insight as to who I am and where Velo is going and my thoughts behind health and fitness as you get older. If you enjoyed this podcast, do me a favor, drop me a comment, hit me a like, ask me a question, because I love what I'm doing. And if I can help anybody in any way, then that's great. And, you know, if there's someone that you know that could benefit from any of the videos, podcasts, Instagram stuff that I put out, direct them towards it, because that helps me grow know, like, and trust within cycling and fitness sphere and the industry. And again, it just helps grow the business and help me out. And I do this, do the podcast, do the YouTube stuff, not because I'm trying to be a podcaster or a YouTuber, but because I love what I do. And yes, it helps grow the business in a nice organic way, but it takes a lot of time to put these things together. Anyway, I better shut up now. I'll leave you with this. My next podcast is an interview with a really lovely lady who's just done a massive challenge, which got her a world record.